Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us for this Q&A of Shorts Program 4. I would just like to quickly reintroduce our guests. I will say the name of your film, and if you could just say your name and the name of the place that you're speaking to us from. So, Mission HEBRON.
My name is Rona Segal, and I'm speaking from Israel.
The train station.
My name is Lyanna Patrick. I'm speaking from the ancestral unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, currently known as Vancouver, BC.
In the communion of my cousin Andrea.
Hi, I'm Brandán Cerviño, and I'm speaking from Galicia, Spain.
In the beauty president.
Hi, I'm Whitney Skauge, and I'm speaking from Los Angeles.
And the way we wait.
Hi, I'm Ji-Yoon, and I'm speaking from Seoul, South Korea.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for being here. This program really features such an incredible range of subjects, and whether the focus is the personal or the political, in some cases it's certainly both. I think what brings them together thematically is that each really features such a beautiful, sometimes poetic revelation or realization of how we kind of see ourselves in this world and what our impact is. So while you have these durational limitations of a short film, you were all able to accomplish so much with it. So I just want to begin by asking what prompted you to make your film. So if we could start with you, Rona.
So my film is, I'm basically interviewing ex-soldiers, combat soldiers, officers, and soldiers of all kinds of different parts. About their service in a specific city, Hebron. And there are many reasons why I wanted to do it or do it the way I did, but to name one, in Israel, military service is obligatory. I actually was also serving in the military when I was 18, and we all do, most of us do, for at least 2 years. And I was actually making films in the army as an 18-year-old. This is where I studied how to make films. This is, I went to a course in the army, and we were making like this very recruited films, very like, obviously like very military films. And it felt like something that I really wanted to do, to come back to the field of the army, but this time from a more critical perspective, which you cannot have when you're 18.
Wow, that's incredible. And Lyanna, could you tell us how you turned this single photo into such a beautiful animated film?
Yeah, thank you. So as you mentioned, there is a photograph at the beginning of the film, and we returned to it at the end as well. And I hadn't thought too much about where this photo was taken when I was younger or throughout my life. But when I was doing a series, I worked on a series of short films for the Knowledge Network, which is a network in Canada. And we were looking at, through this series, we were looking at buildings. The concept was beyond the facade. So we were looking at buildings and then kind of the history behind these buildings. And we were trying to tell really stories that hadn't been told and hadn't been explored. And I was actually talking to my family about this, and they mentioned this train station. And the train station was at the residential school that my dad had been to. So some people are familiar with this history in Canada and in the United States. They were called boarding schools, but they were schools that Indigenous children were taken to. They were forcibly removed from their families and brought to these schools. And there was one that was really close to my dad's community. And I think it's not really known that children were taken to these schools by cattle truck and by different means, but they were also transported there by train, which I think has, certain implications and feelings that evoke certain feelings when you think about being forcibly removed and taken somewhere by train. So it's this really kind of layered experience, and I was looking for community members to tell their stories about arriving at the school and what that experience was like. And it was really, really hard to find somebody for very good reasons, because it's a traumatic history. And then eventually my producers were like, well, and I lived there actually when I was a baby. at the school. And that's why there's this picture of me at this train station. And they said, well, what about, you know, telling the story about you and your father? And one of the stories that I've grown up with knowing is that my grandma walking from our community on the train tracks to visit my dad's school is one of the things that saved his life at that school. And I thought, oh, I don't know that I'm ready to tell this. This is such a personal story. Like I want to turn the camera on somebody else, not on me. But with a lot of care and support and this beautiful collaborative process. And I think it helped that it was animated. That made it somehow we were more able to tell that story. I was more open and willing, and of course the participation of my family in that process as well. So it was not what I had intended to do, but it turned out really beautifully, and it was such a really powerful and healing process in some ways.
Wow.
Making the film.
And Brandán, your film also is about your family, and it almost just seems like you're just having a great time with your cousin, but the film is no less fully realized. Could you tell us how it kind of came into being?
Can you repeat me the question, please?
Sure, yeah. I'm just asking about how this actually turned into a film, because it really just seems like you're having a great time with your cousin.
Yeah, it started like a joke, almost, because I study cinema outside Spain in another country. So when I come back, my grandparents asked me to take some photos of the communion, because I study cinema. So you are gonna to take some photos, and it started like a joke, a game between my cousin and I. But soon I found like cinematic things for me, like the contrast between the religious ceremony and the vision of a kid and the sense of humor and things like that. So slowly, but at the end, it becomes a little film, yes.
And Whitney, you have such a wonderful subject. How did you come to know of Terrence Allen Smith, aka Miss Joan Jett Black? And what inspired you to create this portrait?
Yeah, so I was actually doing research for the company I work for. It's called Breakwater Studios, and we were working on another series. And I am very politically minded and I'm queer. So I was doing searches that had those kind of keywords in it. And I came across Terrence, and it was an article that basically said drag queen runs for president. And I was like, what is this? And I found out that it was in the 90s and that it was a whole campaign. And I ended up going through kind of this internet hole of trying to find Terrence, and we found him, and it actually got declined for the series that I originally found it for. And then I went to my boss and I was like, look, I can't get this out of my head. And I think the reason I really couldn't get it out of my head was because as a queer person and as a queer, knowing the queer community, we really don't have that much history that we can fall back on and that we can look to see where we've come from and to see where we're going. And I think that history is really important to preserve and celebrate. And so once I found Terrence and, him and I connected, it was kind of this kindred spirit situation where, I was this younger queer person coming to capture his story. And so, for me as a documentary filmmaker, I feel an intense responsibility to help shift society towards more progress. And so through this piece, I really wanted to show that queer people have been politically active for a very long time and have been doing that to bring more visibility and representation to our community in order to get what we need, to get housing, to get help for the AIDS crisis, to get just general respect. And so I think, for me, the film was really about elevating Terrence as a queer pioneer.
Yeah, it absolutely does that. And Ji-Yoon, kind of like Lyanna, your film is really a personal film. How did you decide as you were kind of experiencing this intense moment in your family that you were going to turn it into a film?
Yeah, it's very personal film. I think I didn't mean to complete this film this way, because I've always interested in making film about impermanence. So I wanted to include the sandcastle sequence, like how, because that was the visualization of the impermanence, and I had very low ideas about it, but at that time, my grandmother was in a very critical situation, and I was studying abroad, and then we live very distant, but I visited her, and yeah, it just happens unexpectedly, and that whole process becomes the part of this film. And when I visited my home, I look at the photos that I took with her like long time ago, and then I reconstructed this film. And it's not political film, or it's not like about social changes, but I think it's very universal story that everyone can relate to. So and I've tried not to make this film too personal, like, because it's a personal film, but making this film universal story was an important purpose or goal. So I tried to make an emotional distance when I edit this film, because I could be very emotional when I edited this film, but I tried to have proper distance, because I'm also the part of this film, so it was quite hard. But I tried to have that proper distance with this film.
Wow. I want to ask next about the kind of visual aesthetic and stylistic approaches that you all decided to take in your films. There, we have such a range here of different approaches. So if we could start with you, Rona, could you speak about your kind of visual approach, potentially about editing together this at times quite disturbing footage with the interview portions?
Well, actually, it started from the testimonies, from what the soldiers told me. I had much more soldiers at the beginning. I had much more testimonies of soldiers, and I don't know, maybe 20, and they kept mentioning the same words, and it's military words. It's words that have their meaning only in the context of military. Some of the words are like slang or just like, like words that describe something that might be terrible, but the way the word is the way it's worded makes it sound like, yeah, it's a procedure. It's something we do. So I thought it would be nice to do it as like a dictionary. And at first I thought only about the testimonies, but then I realized that almost everyone in Hebron shot something sometime once, I mean, with the cellular phones. So I started investigating what kind of footage can I find for each term that I'm using. And I was drowning by footage, so there's so much for each one. I don't know. Did I answer the question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's fascinating. I mean, the footage itself is just kind of like you're hearing this personal experience, and we've been talking a lot about this kind of distancing effect, but to hear the personal experience and then to see what it actually is in that moment is really.
The thing is, I don't know if it's very noticeable. The testimonies are by soldiers. Most of the footage was shot by Palestinians. So, I mean, it kind of like creates a circle that doesn't exist in reality.
Yeah. And Lyanna, your film is so beautifully animated. You told us how it came into being, but I would love you to get a little bit more into the kind of how the animation process was.
Yeah. And initially, we had lots of conversations about how we might tell the story. And we were thinking about, before we had the animation idea, just having a camera and having it like travel on the track. And, you can hear the sounds of the train and the track, and you hear, kind of more of a soundscape, and people's stories talking about what it meant to go there. Because, I mean, the other thing about this story, which is important to understand, is that like children arrived, but children left as well. And the day when they left, it was really happy, so you have these kind of multi-layers of emotion and feeling. And so we're just trying to figure out how to kind of capture all of that. And then one of the producers was like, "Oh, what about an animation?" And I don't do animation at all, but it was such an intriguing idea. And one of I think the really great things that came out of that, because it's a 2-minute piece, right? And the school in our territory operated over a 70-year period. And children came from, all over the territory, from way far up in the Northwest Territories. They came down like far, far north, Arctic. And so how do you like collapse this complex, multi-layered, national, because people, children came from many different nations, story into 2 minutes? And you can actually do this really creatively with animation. You can cross time and space really quickly. And so that's kind of what we were able to do. And just the process of drawing, I gathered up all of our, I was there, I visit family, so I had lots of photographs, and then we shared them with the illustrator whose name is Chloe Mustouche, and she's a Blackfoot illustrator from Alberta. And it was just a really beautiful collaboration. So she did up the illustrations. And then of course, because of COVID, we were doing a lot of this work remotely. So, which actually worked really well. I didn't think that process could work so well from a distance, but we were able to really communicate, and just a really, I mean, I guess, you work with the people for a reason, but it was a really, collaborative, respectful, generative process of making that, and the people that we brought together to do that. So yeah, it was interesting. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work just for 2 minutes. So I'm not sure how much more animation I'm going to do, but it's worth it to explore and have fun with it.
That's lovely. And Brandán, your film is speaking almost an entirely different visual language. Could you talk about how this kind of visual aesthetic came together for you?
First, it was like domestic footage, like an amateur footage. But the most part of the footage, it is like first single shots, primeros, like first shots. Sorry about my English. I'm not used to speak about my work in English. But close shots. That's it. And so it's like the expression of my cousin all the time. So the off screen is very important for me, more than the visual. The strong of the film is in the sound, like in the voiceover, the use of the music and that. And well, there is the first part, like it's more collaborative with my cousin, that the little VFX and the little animations. So we do that because for my cousin, like be part of the process,
Yeah, absolutely. Whitney, you mentioned that you went on a kind of an internet hole trying to find Terrence. The archival footage that you have is really wonderful. If you could talk about kind of how you decided to present it in this way, and what that kind of process was for you.
Yeah, so part of my, I guess, internet sleuthing was finding this Chicago Independent Archive. And there was all of this footage from the campaign. Everything that you see in the film, I found on this archive, and found from a couple different sources. And really, it was so amazing to be able to have Terrence in real life in present day, and then to have this archival footage to help supplement the story and really show that it really happens and it was real. And I think archives are so important because it's proof. And I think a lot of times there's queer erasure, and for me it was really important to put that in the film and to have it be kind of a central focus of the film. So the film's kind of structured where Terrence is leading you through the archival. And so it's just fun. It's fun footage, you know, and it's like, why not try to use this as much as we can? And we have an amazing archival team that really helps us make sure that we're going through all the proper channels and doing our due diligence with how we use it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of how I structured the film, I really just wanted it to be Terrence telling his story. Simple as that. Really setting a stage for him to be able to talk about what had happened. And so I really lucked out with the archival. I mean, it was amazing footage and really lucky to be able to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ji-Yoon, your film, it seems to almost change as it progresses, kind of the visual language that it's using. Could you talk about how you brought this together in this kind of, you know, at times experimental approach and with this beautiful visual metaphor that you use?
Yeah, I think the final cut was almost the 30s. I mean, I edited like for 2 months, and the final cut was almost 30 times. I don't know. I think I like 30th version, I guess. Like I think I edited like so much time. And I tried to give some consistency in this film, because, you know, I have so many different elements, like the sandcastle sequence and the hospital sequence, and also I used the fortune teller sequence at the first part of this film. So it's quite complicated, but it's just 11 minutes. So the editing process was quite difficult. So I don't know how I did it. I just did it at the time, like crazily, to just meet the deadlines. And but the thing is, like, you know, I tried the final shot of this film is the just very wide shot of the sandcastle, the completed one. And before this shot, I only showed the process of making this sandcastle, and I just I only showed the process of this, like not showing what's happening in this film. But at the end of this film, you are gonna see this the completed sandcastle. You know what I mean? So I tried to show the abstract elements, and also the I don't know, you know what I mean? It's quite it's hard to explain how I edited, but like, yeah, it's quite hard to explain. Yeah,
kind of more emotional.
Yeah, it's I was lucky to have that final version, I think. Yeah.
Well, we don't have too much time left, but I did want to ask one quick question, you know, from each of your films. But so if we could just start with Rona, you talk at the beginning, you say, do you have any thoughts about the exposure? So what does it mean for these soldiers to kind of come forward with their experiences?
First of all, they all pay a big social price for their participating in the film. The atmosphere, the public atmosphere in Israel is that people, soldiers, ex-soldiers that are coming forward with the things they've done during their service and they regret or wish they didn't do, are traitors. So, and they're like, they pay a price for that. I mean, it depends on what you want to do next in life, but usually when you finish the army, you're very young. And the people that are talking in my film, most of them are quite young, and exposing yourself like this gets you somehow in kind of like blacklisted for some kind of jobs, and it's a big decision. I mentioned before I had more soldiers like that came forward to me and wanted to speak, and day before the shooting I lost many of them. So like, or 2 days, it was like, I anticipated that, but still it was still hard. But I mean, I understand that also. I can really understand that.
And Lyanna, you are able to tell the story of 3 generations in 2 minutes. Could you talk about the conversations with your family as you're putting together this film?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a reconnection to place. You continue to tell these stories. I've often, these are the stories I'm starting to tell increasingly as I get older, I guess, the more personal lived ones. And, but I also think that they highlight the experiences of many Indigenous people. And one of the things that really emerged strongly for me was that so much of the media and so much of the exposure that Indigenous peoples get here and elsewhere in the world is really centered around like they're what we call damage-centered narratives. It really highlights trauma and pain, and this is absolutely true. Like that is very much our experience. However, there's also joy and laughter and strength, and we continue to live and occupy our territories, and so that's kind of what also came out of my conversations with family is that there's so much to celebrate in the love that we have for each other, for our communities, for our lands, and that's just something that I really hoped to convey in this really short time frame.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brandán, you talked about your collaboration with your cousin. What was it like working with a kid, and how much actual involvement did she have in the filmmaking process? And were any of her requests maybe too much for you to do?
No, I have a lot of fun. It was like very easy. I edit all and shoot, and she only asked, so it was or commands, so it was easy and fun. Most of all, it was a conversation. We talk a lot, and I record the conversations, so it was very natural, very easy.
And Whitney, I want to know a little bit more about the kind of conversations you had with Terrence. Was it fun for him to kind of revisit this old footage with you, or kind of what was that experience connecting with that history?
Yeah, I think it was probably quite a trip for him. He hadn't seen most of that footage ever. So I think it was really like an experience to like go back into that and relive that. And he has a plethora of stories that didn't make it into the film, and he's just so articulate, and he's funny and just really great to converse with. And I think it was just a moment of being, in the interview, I really tried to explain to him how important this moment is and how important his impact was. And I think it took him a while to really get on that page with me, that this really meant something and it means a lot to people. And I think it's something he's still processing. This is something that happened 30 years ago for him. It was a little blip on his life, he says, but it is such an important part of American history. And so how do you kind of explain that to someone? And in the interview, it was kind of this unraveling of him coming to terms with that. So it was great. It was great.
Awesome. And Ji-Yoon, you have this incredibly lovely moment with your grandma where you tell her that she's beautiful. Kind of, it seems like there was maybe a little bit of a hill to get over there with them kind of willing to kind of show this personal, intimate family moment. Could you talk about the conversations that you had with your family in putting this film together?
Yeah, I did. I think the conversation was very important in this film, and about the conversation with my mom, I I recorded separately in our house. You know, I didn't do that in the hospital, but I just did it in the house. And my mom is quite honest, honest about it. So she's quite she just, you know, say like very dryly. And when I asked her, like, do you have something to know about your mom? I expected that she would tell me about specific answers, like, oh, I want to know about this one. But she answered like, what is the use of asking now when she's in critical, and she was, you know, like that sentimental about that moment. And I think, yeah, so it was quite unexpected answers, and I think it added important layers in this film. And also about conversation with my grandma, it was quite hard to film her because she was in a very bad situation. So sometimes I thought, why am I filming her? Like, you know, because it's I kept asking myself why I'm doing this, like because I felt that sometimes I felt like I don't know the reason, but I think I could be more closer to her by making film. And you know, when she was okay, I filmed her, and but I try not to objectify her. So, and when I asked her about that question, like and she asked me, why are you filming me? And I think that question was very important for me. Like, and yeah, I think that answer was in backbone of this film. And I think I quite understand about it after completing this film.
Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful.
Thank
you all so much for taking the time to speak with me today, and congratulations on these incredible films. We are really tremendously honored to be presenting them as a part of AFI Docs. And thank you to everyone for being here today. Please visit our website at docs.afi.com for more opportunities to interact with these films, audiences, and filmmakers, and of course, to watch more films. If you love this shorts program like we do, please tell your friends that this and all of the shorts programs are available to screen throughout the entire festival. And we would love to hear from you on social media at #AFIDocs. Thanks so much, everyone.